Joey Wheeler finished Battle City in the top 4 duelist on the planet. He beat an Egyptian god card holder. He reached the semi-finals of the most competitive tournament in the show's history. He pushed Merrick, a man with the winged dragon of Ra and a Millennium item, to the absolute limit of what that duel could contain. And for 20 years the conversation about Joey Wheeler has been the same. He got lucky, his deck was bad, he only got as far as he did because the show needed him to. I want to push back on that, because when you actually go through Joey's deck card by card, when you look at what he was building across Duelist Kingdom and Battle City and why, the picture is significantly more interesting than the reputation suggests. His deck wasn't perfect, there are real problems in it worth talking about honestly, but bad? I don't think that word means what people think it means when they use it to describe Joey Wheeler. To have an honest conversation about Joey's deck, you have to start at the very beginning of Duelist Kingdom, because the deck he walked onto that boat with was genuinely terrible. Not in a charming way, in a real structural sense. He had no trap cards, no spell cards, just a pile of warrior and beast warrior type monsters, with no coherent strategy connecting them. He didn't even know how to play properly yet. He was learning the rules in real time, while competing in a tournament against people who had been playing for years. That's the baseline. That's where Joey Wheeler started. What happened between that starting point and Battle City is the part of his story that never gets enough credit. On the boat ride to Duelist Kingdom, he trades for Baby Dragon, Salamandra, Shield and Sword, and Kunai with Chain. Yugi gives him Time Wizard. He wins Red Eyes Black Dragon off Rex Raptor in an anti-duel, a card that becomes the emotional center of his entire identity as a duelist. By the time he reaches the Duelist Kingdom finals, he has built an actual functioning strategy around the Time Wizard and Baby Dragon combo. He understands how to use his spell and trap cards situationally, and he wins enough duels in that tournament to reach the final 2 against Yugi himself. His loss to Yugi in that final isn't the indictment people treat it as either. He had Yugi down to almost no life points. Time Wizard's aging effect on Dark Magician is what turned the duel. It unlocked Dark Sage, which Yugi himself couldn't have predicted was coming. Joey played his best card at the right moment. It happened to unlock a response he had no way to anticipate. That's not bad dueling, that's losing to a top deck. Then Battle City happens. And this is where the deck conversation gets genuinely interesting. The rules change completely for Battle City. Tribute summons become mandatory for high-level monsters, which is significant because Joey's Duelist Kingdom deck was loaded with high-level monsters he could play for free under the old rules. He essentially has to rebuild from the ground up, and what he builds is a deck that Esparoba, a legitimately strong duelist, looks at and immediately calls a gamble deck. The community has largely agreed with the Roba's assessment for 20 years, but I think that label deserves a closer look, because calling it a gamble deck treats the luck cards as the story when they might actually be the least interesting part of what Joey was running. Drop your take in the comments right now. Do you think Joey's deck was actually bad, or do you think the show just needed him to lose at specific moments? I'll come back to this. Because the cards he won through Battle City tell a different story than the ones he started with. Let's talk about Jinzo, because if you want to make the argument that Joey's deck was bad, you have to explain what Jinzo is doing in it. And the answer is that Jinzo is one of the most powerful cards in the entire Battle City format. Its effect negates all trap cards while it's on the field, every single one, for both players, which in a format where trap cards are one of the primary ways duelists control the board, is an absolutely devastating piece of disruption. Joey won it from Esparoba and immediately understood its value. He used it consistently and intelligently through Battle City, and there are multiple duels where Jinzo is the single card that holds his strategy together. That's not a luck card, that's a high-level strategic asset deployed correctly. Then there's Guilford the Lightning, a level 8 warrior that, when tribute summoned using 3 monsters, destroys every monster your opponent controls the moment it hits the field. No targeting, no chaining, every monster gone. In a format with no quick ways to negate monster effects, that's a board wipe. Joey runs it, he knows what it does, he builds plays around the possibility of using it in the right situation. Again, not a luck card, a power card that requires setup and understanding to use effectively. And then there's the one win that I think makes the strongest case for Joey's deck having genuine strategic merit, his duel against Weevil Underwood in Battle City. Weevil cheated. Before the duel even started, he had a card slipped into Joey's deck, Parasite, a nasty trap that infects the opponent's monsters and turns them into insect types, which then feeds directly into Weevil's insect-based strategy. Joey is dueling with a sabotage deck against an opponent who has been playing insects his entire life, and who knows exactly how to exploit the parasite he put in Joey's cards. He still wins, not through luck, through Gearfried the Iron Knight, a warrior monster whose effect destroys any equipped card attached to it the moment it's equipped. When Weevil tries to equip Gearfried with a card to gain advantage, Gearfried destroys it automatically. The parasite can't infect Gearfried because Gearfried's effect fires before the infection takes hold. Joey didn't draw into a lucky top deck here. He had a card in his deck whose specific mechanic was the counter to exactly what Weevil was doing. That's either a phenomenal coincidence, or Joey understood his deck well enough to have Gearfried in there for a reason. He also defeats Insect Queen in that same duel, a monster that gains attack points for every insect on the field and requires Weevil to sacrifice an insect to attack. Joey beats it, in a duel with a sabotage deck against a cheating opponent. That's not plot armor doing the heavy lifting, that's a duelist who understands how to read the situation he's in and find the card that solves it. And then there's the Merrick duel, which is the single best evidence that Joey Wheeler was genuinely good at this game. Because Merrick had the Winged Dragon of Ra, and Joey had him beaten anyway. Before I get into that, if this breakdown is making you want to actually run Joey's deck, everything from Red Eye's Black Dragon to Jinzo to Guilford the Lightning is available on Card Trader, and the link in the description has you covered. My code DOOMX saves you 5% on your first order and helps support the channel. Running the deck with this context in your head changes how every card feels when it hits the field. Now, Merrick. Joey Wheeler had Merrick Ishtar beaten. That isn't a hot take. It's what the duel shows you if you watch it without the result coloring your reading of it. Merrick summoned the Winged Dragon of Ra. Joey countered it. Merrick was at 0 monsters and taking damage. Joey had a monster on the field ready to attack for game. His body gave out from the Shadow Game damage before he could call the attack. The final blow never landed because Joey Wheeler collapsed, not because Merrick outdueled him. That's one of the most significant duels in the original series, ending in a technicality against the player who was actually winning it. If you're going to talk about Joey's deck honestly, you have to include the fact that it beat an Egyptian god card in the hands of the season's main villain. The deck was capable of that. Now, the real problems. Because there are real problems, and pretending otherwise wouldn't be honest. The luck cards are a genuine structural issue, and I think the show itself understood that. Graceful Dice and Skull Dice, the 2 cards you saw at the start of this video, are Joey's most iconic luck-based tools. Graceful Dice rolls a die and multiplies a monster's attack points by the result. Skull Dice does the same, but for the opponent's monster, weakening it. The outcomes are completely random. In a format where experienced duelists are making calculated plays and building towards specific outcomes, cards that hand control of the result to a random number are legitimately dangerous to run because they can fail you at exactly the moment you need them most. And they did, most famously against Siegfried in the Grand Championship arc, where Joey's luck-based strategy backfired at a critical moment and cost him the duel. The honest assessment is that these cards belong in a different kind of deck, one built specifically around variance and unpredictability as a deliberate strategy, and Joey's deck isn't quite focused enough to make that approach work consistently. He had too many power cards running alongside too many luck cards, and those two philosophies pull against each other rather than reinforcing each other. But here's the thing that gets lost in that criticism. Joey's deck being inconsistent isn't the same as it being bad. Inconsistency is a design problem, a problem of what the deck is trying to do and how coherently it pursues that goal. Bad is something different. Bad means the cards are individually weak, the strategy is fundamentally flawed, the duelist doesn't know what they're doing. Joey's deck doesn't fail those tests. Jinzo is a great card, Guilford the Lightning is a great card, Red Eye's Black Dragon, when Joey had it, gave him a genuine high-powered threat that commanded respect. The problem isn't the power level, it's that the deck couldn't consistently access its power at the right moments because the luck cards were creating variance where Joey needed reliability. And when you think about who Joey Wheeler is as a character, what the deck is supposed to represent about him, that inconsistency starts to look less like a design flaw and more like a deliberate choice by the writers. Joey is someone who fights with everything he has, regardless of the odds, someone who reaches for outcomes that shouldn't be possible, and sometimes gets them. A completely reliable, optimized, strategically sound deck would be accurate to where Joey ends up as a duelist. It wouldn't be accurate to who Joey is. The luck cards are frustrating mechanically, their honest characterization. That doesn't excuse the structural problems, but it changes the conversation from "this deck is bad" to "this deck is built for a specific person who duels a specific way," and the limitations of that approach are part of the portrait. So, was Joey's deck actually bad? The honest answer is that it was inconsistent. It had real structural problems, specifically around how the luck-based cards sat alongside the power cards without a clear philosophy tying them together. There are duels he lost that a more focused deck would have won. That's real. But bad? Bad implies the deck couldn't compete, and the record doesn't support that. He reached the Duelist Kingdom finals. He reached the Battle City semifinals. He beat an Egyptian god card holder. He won duels against cheating opponents with sabotaged decks. His deck was capable of all of that. What the deck actually was is something more interesting than bad. It was the deck of someone who was still figuring out who they were as a duelist while simultaneously competing against people who had already found their answer. And by Battle City's end, you can see the shape of what Joey's deck could have become if he'd had another tournament to refine it. Red Eyes Black Dragon, Jinzo, Guilford the Lightning, a warrior-based core built around Gearfried. That's a real deck. That's a focused identity. He was getting there. Go check the comments. I asked at the start whether you thought Joey's deck was actually bad, or whether the show just needed him to lose at specific moments. I want to know what you decided after watching this. And if you want to know which specific duel proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Joey Wheeler was genuinely elite when he was at his best, that breakdown is next. The answer